found the correct words to use to describe it, which is sort of like what I call open sourcing escrow. So this is me, I'm Lishen. And in my normal day-to-day job, I do foreign exchange, I work at ABSA, and my normal work is basically like using .NET framework, etc., etc. C# type of stuff, very Microsoft stack. This particular presentation is what I call the wallets presentation. I'm trying to streamline business operations. And the whole idea behind this is to put as much automation and fewer steps in place where there could be human intervention. It's also, like I said, open sourcing escrow, which is allowing for a trust relationship to be built within the application. And with the system basically being the custodian of a transaction. So I know like banks, like other banks and stuff have escrow services. So this is kind of like open sourcing it where every single system that uses this would basically use or expand on Investec being an escrow provider. Okay, so the system that I eventually built is .NET Core using Postgres and Redis. It's a small little app that I made. I went into Docker and Fargate on AWS, but the demo that I have doesn't actually have that. It was actually more of the beginning parts. I'll take you through the architecture. Quotes basically. So I use this quote because I'm a fundamental believer that physical properties, like actual physics concepts, are always going to be something that we need to strive to understand. And it helped me a lot here because this was kind of like it started off as a big project and I broke it down into small little pieces. Okay, so what I'm going to showcase to you is basically a small piece of a whole bunch of use cases. Like you could use this in any one of these use cases. One being, like I said, escrow type, so it's open sourcing escrow. If you want to do like inter-department budgeting, so let's say you're an organization, you have like multiple little departments, and then you do your budgeting, and like if you need to manage your money, this is an easier way for you to see how much money is available in each department, because you basically put it out into all of these wallets at the beginning, and then as time goes on, they can actually transfer between themselves, but all under one bank account. So it's not like you have to get multiple bank accounts to get this working. Then the last one that I thought about is probably something that it could be used for is tender processing. So like, let's say you have a tender for, I don't know, a road or whatever the case may be, and there's a whole bunch of, procedures that need to happen. So controlling the money is what I believe is important, because that, prevents fraud and all sorts of other things from happening. So controlling the money by having the escrow type stuff baked into the system is actually what I believe will stop the fraud. I'm hoping. So like this is basically a couple of use cases that I thought about and how it works. Okay, cool. All right, so like I said before with the quote, I focused it on very small services, which are individually scalable. And because they're so small, they're easy to update. Very focused, normal, solid principles, single responsibility stuff. The bank service is actually the thing that's tied to Investec. And the way in which I envision this thing being used is that it will be scheduled, and it will run every 30 minutes or an hour or whatever the case may be is. How it works is that someone registers a wallet. You get like an easy equity style registration number. You deposit money into this number. The bank service runs, picks up the deposit and checks the description being the number, and then it associates the deposit with the wallet. The bank service then, caches stuff from the previous run so that, it can always know what the latest transactions are. I'm assuming future iterations of the account service with Investec would probably have like, searching parameters or something. I know maybe it's there already and I haven't really used it properly. That could also be a thing. So yeah, so that's the payment reference part and how it allocates funds. Okay, so I envision the architecture being like this, which is a cloud-based architecture for scalability. These pieces over here are basically backend for front ends, which is like, because I have a mobile app and I have a website, I have these sort of clients and users type thing using it, where clients would actually be the ones registering wallets for something. So one of the use cases is, let's say you want to reverse the internet browsing thing where you search for stuff on Takealot, for example. Here you could say, I'm not going to search for cheese. I'm willing to pay $500 for this special kind of cheese. That's the amount that I put in the wallet. Someone go and find it for me. It goes in the community, and somewhere down the line, someone finds it, it gets sent to me. You can have a third party pick it up, whatever the case may be, and then the money gets transferred. So the people that actually put money in would be the clients. The people that go and exchange the goods, I assume, would be users. And in essence, they would all just create wallets, and the wallets are then stored in an Aurora database in this case. So in this particular setup that I have, it's basically a private subnet. So everything is kind of like housed within a secure private environment. However, I found that if I wanted to use the complete isolation, which is VPC endpoints, they actually get quite expensive because you have to add so many. And you also need IPv6, which I think is a question that I asked in one of the Slack channels as well, is that, can I access the Investec API using IPv6? So I opted for a NAT gateway because it's just one NAT gateway, but it's split across AZ, so it's 2 NAT gateways, and that lowered my costs. Anyway, going to the demo, the thing with the demo is that I recorded it beforehand, and it's got my voice in it, so I'm going to mute myself for a few minutes, and you guys can listen to this. And it's basically showcasing on a local machine just the wallets API, the bank's API, and it's talking to the Investec API. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself and press play. Of my wallets application, alpha phase. So there's 3 components to it. There's the SDK, the bank service, and the wallet service. So the SDK is, of course, the thing that talks to Investec. There were a couple that were actually created. I found that out after I created mine. So that was actually good to find out later. But at least I actually incorporated quite a few things from some of the others, but I think we should contribute to those. Then there's the bank service, which basically syncs all the bank transactions into the wallet, and the wallet service is basically the thing that manages the wallets. All right, so let me give you an overview of what it is. So if I go to my Postgres database, I have a wallet that is preloaded. This is the reference number of the wallet, and I deleted all the transactions as part of the demo, so there's no transactions. Then my Redis cache is basically a cache that I use to make sure that the bank service is keeping track of the previous run. So it keeps 3 keys. The one key is a hash of the entire transaction payload for the run. The second key is a hash of the last transaction ordered by date, the last transaction that it actually tried to sync or update or check. And then there's also a key for the date of the last transaction that it did. Alright, so I fired up my API. So this is the wallets API that is linked to this database. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you, I guess, the transactions that are inside this account. So this is the transaction that I'm looking for. So there's quite a few transactions that are inside this account. I did a deposit a couple days ago into the account, and I used the wallet ID as the reference, similar to how you would do with Easy Equities, for example. So this is just to give you an idea that, this is what's in the Investec account. Alright, so what we're going to do here is my wallet service is running. I'm going to start up my app. I just made a small little app just to showcase the wallet service. It just takes a little while to start. Give a sec. Okay. Running quite a lot of things at the moment. Okay. So if we go to the wallet, it talks to the wallet service, And this app is baked in with this reference number, which is the same reference number that I deposited to, and it shows you 0, as it should, because there's nothing in the associated, no transactions associated with the wallet yet. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start up my bank service, which is now going to sync the transactions. And what it does is basically looks through all the descriptions and checks the description against the wallet service. So it actually talks to this wallet service and checks the description and says, does this wallet exist? And says, okay, cool, it exists. So now it's going to credit the wallet, and then after the run, it updates all the hashes that I spoke about. So if I refresh the screen, you should see the $50, which is the exact amount that I was hoping to find. And that is my demo. A few things that I just want to quickly run through is the transactions are saved in a database. So this wallet ID 1 has now has a transaction on it for $50, and my hashes are updated as well, which indicates the hash for this run. So the idea behind this is that all of these components, this wallet component, this bank service component, can be containerized and placed on, run inside a Docker container. You can schedule this one, but they kind of work in tandem. So everything is open source, everything's ready to use. I will be, as of this recording, I will, geez, hearing myself again is actually quite jarring. Anyway, okay, so yeah, as I was ending up there, everything's open source, everything's ready to rock and roll there. I'm making changes to put it into Docker. Challenges that I encountered, well, I've never used any of this stuff before. I use .NET Framework in my day-to-day. I use MS SQL, never used containers because there's no need for us to use it. We're migrating at the moment because now I basically pushed for all of the new stack. So I managed to convince business to allow us to migrate. So yeah, all the stuff was a huge learning curve. The thing that I decided to keep in common, because there's so many different technologies, is to keep the language the same at least. I mean, I've done other languages before. Keeping the language the same meant that it was easier for me to get up to speed quicker with all this stuff. The other thing that's complicated, so the demo didn't showcase the cloud infrastructure, but the cloud infrastructure was the ECS setup that I did. And the iterations were a bit tough to actually, understand how all the things fitted together. Let's see, next steps. So the next steps for me now, so the next steps for me is like in that architecture diagram, there's a whole bunch of little services. So I'm going to create a .NET new template to go and create all the remaining pieces. This is, part of a much larger project. However, open sourcing escrow as a service, or escrow components, I guess, is the piece that this is about. And I feel that, maybe other teams, people, whoever wants to, businesses, whatever, whoever wants to use this can end up using Investec escrow, so to speak, using this. But for me personally, this is part of a much larger project that does use temporary store of value. Then yeah, configure the build pipelines, automate all of that up, clean up the code. I'm going to investigate event sourcing, and yeah, last bit is to put this all on Docker Hub so that anybody can just pull the image and start using it. Put in your environment, I guess, environment variables for your Investec credentials, all that stuff, and then start using it. If you guys want to get involved, that's my email address. Everything's on GitHub. The reason for the iHire Solutions thing, I created this such a long time ago. It's a small little side thingy that I use to play with ideas. So yes, I'm just putting everything in there. Great, I think that's it from me. Any questions from anyone? I know that a little bit fast, I'm not sure.
Super awesome. Some interesting comments as well.
Struggling to hear you there, man.
I have a question for you. Just that it's very cool. If somebody wants their money out of the wallet, do they just let you know and then you do a payment back to wherever they paid you from? almost have like a database for their bank accounts and then just pay them out.
Yeah, so that's pretty much how I see this working. But when the payments API is set up, then I will automate the payments. But for now, I mean, what's happening is that like on a weekend, on a Sunday, I basically get the list of everybody that wants their payments out, and I do it manually. But yeah, I mean, sorry, Ben, you were a bit quiet. I couldn't hear you. Sorry, man.
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's a lot better.
Okay, yeah. Having some issues with these headphones. Yeah, some interesting comments here as well, like hooking it up with freelancing services so you can kind of prove that you have funds for freelancers before they start working on projects. Byron, you mentioned that this is similar, or do you feel it's similar to Ethereum? I was quite interested in like what aspects do you think it is similar to Ethereum?
Yeah, more specifically the Ethereum smart contracts. I think this might be potentially at least slightly more broad, but from a smart contract perspective, I mean, that's essentially what it can be built for is escrow stuff. So yeah, I mean, you can have somebody deposits funds. It's that separation, and that I think was the important piece of information I was also waiting for, that Wayne asked, was at the end of it, does it get then paid out into a bank account? Because if you're going to do that sort of manual step, then an Ethereum smart contract can essentially be the same thing, because it can also have a manual thing. But that's if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, so the idea is that because I want to, there's a whole bunch of use cases where, let's say, for example, you'll have money in and you'll want to split that money across multiple wallets. So let's say there's a whole bunch of people in the chain that were involved as part of this transaction, right? So think, for example, I put in 300 Rand bounty for cheese and like 5 people share it. And the last person actually has the cheese. I mean, everybody in that sharing chain would want a piece of that bounty because they were part of it. You know what I mean? So it's basically sharing that amongst all of them. So the idea is from me putting the bounty into the cheese wallet and transferring that from one wallet to another to a whole bunch of them. It's wallet to wallet transfer. So there's no real inter-account changes. It's only when those people decide, hey, listen, yeah, I want my money now. And then they say, pay me my money. Here's my bank account details. That's when the payment actually takes place. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I understand it. It still seems weirdly similar, minus the infrastructure in the background.
Yeah, actually, yeah, it could be. Yeah. I just need to read up on Ethereum a little bit more to understand the contract part of it. But yeah.
Basically, Vitok.
Yeah.
Basically, invent Ethereum. Smart.
Yeah.
Well, one of the key differences I see with what he's got there, Byron, is that Ethereum, with the smart contracts, it has to be ETH that you're buying. You have to buy Ethereum. You can't do a fiat. You see, so he works with normal money, with standard fiat currency. With an Ethereum contract, you have to actually buy Ethereum, and Ethereum gets transferred to the other person, which they then have to convert into a local currency. So you obviously take that risk that Ethereum could go up or down depending, the volatility of it. So him working without that volatility could be better, depending on the situation and the environment.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. Sort of leaving it out. Although a token's price can be locked, I mean, you've got stable tokens and things like that. It doesn't have to necessarily be. If it's going to be its own smart contract, it'll be a token of its own. You can lock that to a certain currency, but yeah, I see what you're saying.
I would say the transaction fees the gas fees would be the biggest hurdle there, which this solution would be better for.
Yeah, especially if it's small amounts, like a 50 Rand, or $100. I mean, the gas fees on that is going to eat through that quite quickly.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Ethereum's the better one or whatever the case is. It's more just the idea. I just wanted to, so that I can understand it correctly, sort of liken it to.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, cool.
I think you might run into the wallet part of the regulations around payments. You might run into some stuff. So if you keep it in a closed loop network between product distributors and like or sellers and buyers, I think that might actually be a very valuable thing. That, like, just doing it for public would be a bit like, that's probably why Ethereum works better, because they work outside of the banking sector. Like, if you start, you're basically starting your own bank, you're taking deposits, you have an account, and you're making payments to third parties. So, like, you might, so I think you have to think of this thing almost as a closed loop. People join in, there's some regulation, and then you can transfer that value between them and guarantee almost the transactions that way. So it's very cool.
Thank you. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's definitely not trying to create, because I've found out like how much it actually costs if you run into the banking sort of level type things. And like, I think it's like 250 million Rand you need, like, minimum. It's crazy, just the, the legal part of it. But yeah, it's definitely not that. This is very close loop. And yeah.
Mentioning the legal part of it, I recently purchased a house and I noticed there was a hell of a lot of red tape around funds held in escrow by the lawyers specifically for the purchase. Like, they had red tape around what they had to do with the interest and what kind of interest was supposed to be borne and what they can do with the money and how soon they have to pay it out. How do you envision handling that kind of legal hurdle for a system like this, or is that entirely on the basis of whatever person is currently using it?
So the way in which I envision this thing working is the interest is based on whatever the interest is on the account, right? So let's say it's an Investec account. So the idea is that the people with the largest proportion, the wallets with the largest proportion, so let's say interest comes in, it gets distributed proportionally according to the wallet amount, the total wallet amount. So it's definitely going to be based on that. I have no idea about any of the other legal pieces at the moment, which is why, like, you know, it's something that I'm going to probably run into and then have to deal with if that, you know, comes up. But I'm hoping that for the initial purpose, it's almost like paying for a service. So I am paying for a service and the payment gets paid to the people that provide the service. So that's how I'm looking at this thing working, with the wallets being an intermediary store of value. So I'm hoping that that's the case, which is probably, yeah, we'll see what happens. The other reason why open source is, like, if everybody kind of does it, then the law might have to change. Who knows? I don't know.
I really love the use case of, you buy something on Gumtree, you show them that you've got the money in escrow, and then a courier, like Uber person or pickup person or whoever, goes and picks up the goods, and then the funds, they activate something on their side to release the funds to the buyer. That'd be really awesome. Oh, cool. Adam's showing a Ethereum system which does that, apparently.
And then one of the things that I mentioned, though I don't know whether you guys picked it up, in the single organization or single individual case, that's very, very similar to basically having a envelope budget, where at the start of the month you draw out all your money, you put your grocery monies in an envelope marked groceries, and all your electricity money goes in an envelope marked electricity. And when you pay for electricity, you take money out of that envelope, except doing it in a somewhat less barbaric way and something that could be managed with a card, especially if you integrate it with the payments approval API. So in that before hook, you check whether there's still money in the envelope, and if there isn't enough, you deny the transaction. And in the after hook, if the transaction was successful, you deduct it from the appropriate wallet.
Yeah, that's a cool one too. Cool. I think we need to maybe get on to the next part, which is the Investec product update. Sorry guys, these headphones keep giving me issues. I hope you can still hear me. So yeah, getting onto the Investec product update. Thanks, Lishen, that was super awesome. Obviously put a lot of effort into that, so thank you so much. Thanks also for sharing it with the community. Yeah, it's really awesome. I'm pretty excited. We can also probably do a bunch of interesting things with the community with this project as well, like giving different people wallets and having a wallet system. Maybe hook it up to the community points scoreboard for those who haven't.
Awesome. Yeah, no, we can do that for sure. Cool, thanks, man. Thanks.
Willem and or Wayne, are you guys ready?
I'll kick it off. Ben, are you going to present or must I present? I wasn't sure.
I can present. I wasn't ready to, so.
Okay, no, I'll do it if I can figure out how in Zoom. Does anybody have an idea?
There's a big
share screen button.
No, there's a big share
Ah,
screen.
the big green share screen button. That could solve the problem.
Everyone, it seems to be a design oversight because everyone.
Maybe I'm just special. That is a possibility. Okay, what are you seeing? Are you seeing the programmable banking product update, big blue page? Okay. So this is basically the first big update we've done since almost launching in programmable banking. So I think we're almost going to just look back at like from the start, all the stuff we've done up to now, and then just give you a bit of a feel for what's happening and what's next down the line. How's that for a picture of my team, Ben? You see that? Good job there. So we had a guy from Spotify at Investec a while back, like one of their OD people, you know, these occupational development people that like works on their culture. And they had the most amazing quote, and I was trying to find it. So I constructed it myself because I couldn't find his quote anywhere. But it basically is a quote from Aristotle that says, the whole is more than the sum of its parts. And in context of what he was trying to explain is, if you have a team and you have like 5 really good people in your team, they're not actually like the same as 5 good people because the team adds more value than the 5 people. So it's actually the sum of the interactions between those team members is actually where the power of a team comes from. And I think that's what's relevant in context of this product, because like 5 devs randomly doing stuff on an API can't compare at all to like the awesomeness that is this community and the stuff that we've seen being generated out of it. So I thought it was quite appropriate because this community has done some mind-blowing things. That makes sense. Or was I just mumbling there like a mad thing? Huh? I thought it was cool. Okay, so this what's new is what was new since we launched it. Okay, so very quickly after we launched programmable banking, which is the card like part of it, everybody said they actually just want open APIs, like ironically. So after all of that work with the card, there's obviously a lot of good use cases around card, but the big ask was to just go and launch the API. We didn't anticipate having an open API that quickly, so we put all our gears in line to actually just go and actually launch the open API. So I think if you're new to this community, you probably think it might have been there, but that's only been there for, I don't know, Willem, how long, like 6 months or something. It hasn't been there from the start of this project. So a lot of the work we've done was just getting it up, learning what it is to have an open API, like talking to clients and all these things and looking at the stuff we could expose, all of those stuff. So there's a lot of bug fixes, especially on the root part, not the root part, the programming banking editor part. It was something new. We didn't know what we were really doing from the start. So we had a lot of good feedback from the community on what would help the editor, what wouldn't help the editor. I think it was really powerful because when we first got it, we thought, the editor, it looks fine. But I think there's been some amazing enhancements that's come through based on actual use cases. We added a filter, a date filter and transaction dates to the transaction endpoint. So this was just so that you don't have to pull all your transactions every time. I think previously it used to be like a 30, 60, 90-day thing. If you're like polling for deltas, this was just made more sense initially. We still know there's a problem with the transaction ID thing, and I can give you a bit of a spiel later on about it, what's in the what's next space. We added the running balances on transactions, so you can actually just see them, your actual balance going up. We added keep alive on the lambdas, and I think anybody that's like done some of these things realize those lambdas, when they die and you call it, bypasses that 2-second thing. So we had to like make sure that the lambdas were basically staying alive constantly to let you stay within that 2-second move there. Internally, which nobody really saw, we migrated all of our programmable banking infrastructure to Kubernetes. And then more recently, we had some blockers on the API for some user agents that weren't whitelisted, basically. So like this thing sits on top of another system with basically whitelist user agents. We had to go and add some new ones because we didn't anticipate all the stuff coming through. Willem, I know you did all of that work. And then obviously cores. I don't know if anybody wants explanation on that one. It's like basically, if you're not Investec talking to the API, you need to enable cores. And we've done that work recently.
Wayne, are you able to explain what cores is for the lesser educated?
So cores is cross origin or object origin, I think, resource sharing. So basically what it means is if I have an API and I'm trying to talk to your API and the domain of the API, of me talking to your API, if my domain is not the same as the API one, it sort of thinks it's dodgy because it's who's this third party trying to access your domain. So if I build wayne.com as an API and I build my website wayne.com and it talks to my wayne.com API, life's great. But if I start talking to peter.com, peter.com would say, why is wayne.com talking to me? So what this allows you is to say, allow other domains like peter.com to actually use my API. I know it's a very dumbass explanation, but I think that sort of explains it.
I'm also going to go check out what wayne.com and peter.com look like now.
They own real domains. Don't go look at them. They don't exist. And then we did lots of work with OneCard. That was our first like real business client that we onboarded and that stuff. So there's some really cool shit there. Stuff there, I swear. Okay. So that's been the journey for the last, I would say, I don't know months now, 9 months, 6 to 9 months. Some of the challenges we encountered, we're quite a small team. So I don't know if you all know, this team is basically me, Willem, and Ernst. They're all on the call. And Davina, which was supposed to be, she doubles as our BA or what do you call it? Moonlights as our BA some days. So it's not a big team, and we obviously have to work within the confines of a bank. We're also accountable for all the API gateways within the whole Investec group. So this is also like a part of the job. So as much as we would just love to do this constantly, I think we have a big backlog, small team, and that's always going to be a challenge. How do we get the right stuff prioritized in that environment? I'm sure that's a problem almost every IT team has on earth right now, especially in COVID. We have a dependency on others, like the transaction thing. We're reliant on downstream systems to expose data for us. We expose that via gateways. If we want changes to some of these packets or the payloads, we have to go and beg, borrow, and steal downstream and get people to do changes so we can like do these things. It's not like a full, almost holistic team that can change everything top to bottom. There's many different layers in the bank, and you have to like work your way through it through political maneuvering. And then just when we launched the editor for programmable banking, we found ourselves in a situation where it was quite hard to troubleshoot some of the stuff. We'd get like errors, and like we had to actually go and put in some additional work to put in better logging and put in ways to actually go and troubleshoot some of these issues. People would tell us the code's not running, and like, okay, I don't actually know why. So that took a bit of time, especially in the beginning, to just get us up to speed. I think we're semi-okay now. Okay, I think Ernie, are you going to do a walkthrough just of some of the stuff that's coming?
Yeah, let me just get everything up and running. And then I will screen share this.
As I stop sharing.
Cool, then I will.
Yeah. Wayne, while he's doing that, can you explain a little bit more about OneCard? I'm not sure I understand what that's all about, or is it something that we can't use?
No. So Ben, I'm not sure if I can talk about, how much detail can I talk about? I think a lot.
Well, Michael has given a demo.
Oh yeah. So there's a demo,
so.
Michael, that basically what OneCard is, this company that if you don't want to go to the shops, you can get their app. You can say, go to Woolies and buy me my bread at Woolies. And instead of you going, get a shopper to go there. So they basically using this to almost act as a fraud prevention engine, because people were buying things that weren't really on the list to some extent. So they basically said, it's almost like they have a database that says, no, this guy's going to go to Woolies and only buy bread. So they load like 30 Rand using programmable banking on the card. When he swipes, it does all those validations on it. So it was a really good use case.
Okay. I think I missed that week when the demo was done. Thanks.
Yeah, it was very, very interesting presentation from Michael. Wasn't so much a demo, more just like what they actually solved. So I'll share the link with you afterwards.
Thanks.
Okay, let me see. It is that screen, hopefully. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of the changes that we are releasing soon will be the save publish change. It's been a long time coming, but I'll do a proper live demo. Hopefully everything holds up. So basically you can now save and deploy your code separately. So I'm just going to do a quick console log here just to show how it works. So just do a, whoops, hello world from card, save that, deploy it. And if I simulate the transaction, you can see there, obviously you guys know this, it's the standard simulation, but what you can do is actually now change your code, just save it, so it's not deployed to the card, simulate the transaction, and if it all works the way it should, doesn't look like it actually saved that. Took a while
Maybe
to
just
save.
for a second while you're waiting, the problem we're solving here, I don't know if everybody knows about this problem from the start. You basically, when you write code now and you hit save and you simulate, it actually goes through the production thing, almost that simulated transaction, because there's not the separation of concern between the code you're writing and the actual execution of this emulator. So this was really important for us to start getting it when you're debugging and testing your code to be able to simulate it without actually running through the production system.
Yeah. So there you can see it was actually executing that code, and that's not what's deployed to the card. So we added the select source code here, and you can then switch between the two. So I've now switched back to the code that's actually on the card. It's a very simple way just to be able to test your code without actually running it against the, while deploying it to the card. And then part 2 of the changes that are coming is the after transaction change. So you'll see there's a couple of additions to the after transaction now. You get your sense amount plus the bill amount and bill currency code. So if you have a transaction that's in USD, you'll be able to see the USD and the ZAR values for it. So that's the first change. Second change, we now added this response status. So it's a code and description. This is actually the response back from the card system. So you'll now be able to see what actually happened to your transaction. So if the transaction was declined by your before transaction, you'll see it here. I'll demo that one for you now. So if I make a change here, let's say that will return a false. Simulate the transaction. Sorry. Should have waited for it to save first. Okay. Excuse me, there we go. So authorization is a false there. If you go to the event logs, the after transaction, see it's false, and it was rejected by, so that's the response you get back from the card system. So those are the 2 main new changes that's coming soon.
Well, I have a question. Those response code, do you have a list of the possible response codes that we could get?
We could get that for you. Those are the actual response codes on the card system.
Even if it's just like ranges, like the 900s are errors, or the 300s mean this, or the, you know what I mean? Even if it ranges, it would be great. And maybe just add that to the docs. That would be awesome.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Instead of just returning a false, can we actually return like a false and a description, or is it just the false still?
On the authorization, that will return a false.
No, in the before transaction, when you're actually rejecting it, can you actually like say why you're rejecting it?
In the
It's only
before,
true or false.
you'll only see that in the after transaction, the actual reason.
No.
Yeah.
But if you go to the main.js.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the question is, can you actually only return a true or a false, or can you actually expand it with a description so that you can then actually, when looking at the logs, track that. So
I
it's
failed
only
it
true or
because
false.
there's not enough. There's like you over your limit or something, your specified limit, or you failed the validation, or whatever the reason is, rather than just saying failed.
Yeah, so essentially our card system will only act on a true or a false. So that's the whole idea behind this, is to basically tell the card system whether it should reject that transaction. You cannot actually like expand it with a bit of meta.
Okay.
Yeah, you will, however, if the transaction, if you hit the card limit, you will see it in this list of response codes and descriptions.
Yeah, but that's the card. That's the physical card limit, right? That's
Yes.
not a customized limit that you've set because it's a Woolies transaction and you don't want to spend more than $50 at Woolies or something.
Yeah.
Crazy like
I
that,
can just
right?
give you some context why that would be so strange, why we wouldn't do more in that return true or false from the main.js. So this root engine, or the engine is basically plugs out of card and does a call into like a AWS Lambda, as you can see. That's part of the security model, that the only thing that actually affects our systems is that true or false. We wouldn't actually send anything else up and down, because then it starts opening up possibilities of you injecting a payload or doing anything else. So this was, we got past some of the rigorous security problems in the group by just saying we will always just return a true or false. And card, you like don't have to worry. We won't ever let anything communicate outside of that Lambda except the true false flag.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. Okay. No, I just saw the fact that there's some sort of meta attached to it. Okay. No, but that's fine.
But I don't think anything stops you from making a call out to a Google Sheet and publishing your own return reasons, for example. So you could like.
Yeah. There's definitely other ways around it. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Are these response codes not available publicly already somewhere?
I don't know. That I'll have to find out for you.
I doubt it. Like hardcore card system response codes. Like we'll get a list and see what's there.
We should be able to get the whole list of ones that affect the actual card transaction. I see Adam asked a question on the simulations. They are now closer to the actual card transactions, but it's still a simulation. But it does at least now respond to the code from your before transaction, your after transaction.
The question I'm asking basically is, can we now reasonably expect that if this works, if this behaves a certain way in simulation, that it'll be fine in production? Because one of the issues that we had was that things were working fine in production and then they were working fine in simulation, and then weird things were happening in production. So card declines and so on.
Yeah, it's probably as close as I can get it at the moment. It's just, it doesn't actually run through the card system itself. It runs through the same root engine that's running in production. And it's simulating as close as I can currently.
So just, Adam, I think just have some context there as well. Like the simulator is basically predicting a perfect world scenario. Like if the world was beautiful and the system acted perfectly, that would be the response you'd get. The reality is, and we've seen it with all the use cases, like card systems are doing some strange things sometimes and behaving in a weird way. So it's very hard to predict like the complexity outside of that thing, really. Well, that makes any sense.
So that makes sense. That's perfectly fine. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that there were code issues. So, for example, there were the guide, the documentation, and the simulation were operating with certain responses, not responses, but were raising certain events, but production was raising different events. And so as long as I can be reasonably sure that my code will behave correctly if it's running fine in simulation, I assume that the real world will have different things to offer. But I want to know that the code is reliable because I've not tested it with the simulation.
Yes, the case that you're talking is, for example, when it was triggering that after decline. So all of that has been stripped out. It's now only the before transaction and after transaction.
Okay, yeah, that was the big difference.
Okay, great.
Those extra events.
Yeah, we've changed that.
All right, cool. Okay, cool.
So a question that actually came up in a welcome call the other day is it possible to get on the Open API statement if it's a foreign currency transaction, it doesn't come through what the original transaction amount was? Sorry, I know this isn't exactly programmable card, but it's more pertaining to the Open API statement.
I think that the money settles into your account in the currency of the account. So like if you have a private bank account, it's a RAND account. So the transactions will go in there RAND basically always. It's not like there's a meta flag that says this came from a USD deposit. There's actually a process that happens before the money hits your account, which is this balance of payments process in South Africa, where the money almost goes into like a queue. There's a process that happens, it converts it from a dollar to a RAND, and then the RAND lands into your account. So I'm not sure on the EFT or like that type of payment, if that's ever possible on the card, but I'm not actually sure if they keep that like data on the transactions themselves. There's obviously two systems involved here, so you're not going to get perfect like for like between card and like an EFT type of transaction. But we can go look, maybe for cards, there might be a...
Yeah, it was specifically for card transactions. Just to see that info again on the statement, because okay, so it was actually a business that was going to do logging of transactions to receipt bank storage thing, and they wanted to keep the difference between the original currency charged and the final amount.
So the current API doesn't have it, so we can go look if maybe for card transactions that it's available, but I'm not sure. Willem, you've seen those calls.
Yeah, so we essentially get all transactions from the same business API. I guess what I'll do is I'll just do a bit of an investigation around that and see whether there is actually something that they do provide us at current. But essentially, both all transactions that happens against your account basically gets fed through from that business API. Okay. So if it's there, then happy to share it or include it. Otherwise, yeah, it might be a difficult exercise.
Yeah, we could also reverse engineer it using the card stuff. Or they could.
Now that the currencies in that call, you can basically build your own little spreadsheet on the side, like you say. So
yeah,
I don't know if that's useful. Okay.
Cool. Are there more updates from your side?
I think it's just sharing the upcoming stuff and the stuff that we are currently busy with.
Oh, cool.
Perhaps.
Share again.
Yeah, Martin was saying, does the amount charged to your account and the amount that comes through in ZAR or goes off in ZAR is on the statement, because this guy was showing me on his actual statement that he downloaded from Investec Online that he could see the USD amount and the ZAR amount. So I don't know if that means it's possible, but it is on Investec Online, apparently, as far as I can remember.
Okay, then well, if it's on Investec Online, then the chances of us getting access to that is fairly good.
Okay, cool.
Because we essentially consuming the same, shall I say, stack of business APIs.
Cool.
From an open API perspective.
Just to be transparent, it might be quite complicated, that one, because you know when you like go to the airport and you swipe and they say, do you want to do it in RAND or do you want to do it in dollar? What they're actually asking is like which company is going to do the FX transaction. So like if you do Rand, it might hit Investec and we might get that conversion on our side. But like if it's more upstream, I'm not sure if we always get it. I'm not sure how that stuff works. Like if somebody else is doing the FX. So that might be like quite complicated.
Okay, we'll have a look nonetheless.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. I've done lots of talking. Willem, do you want to take this one? Or do you want me to talk?
Yeah, no, it's fine. So basically, and that's something that we've been mentioning fairly often in the recent meetups. So essentially, the big issue here is, I mean, once you've got your OAuth creds, like that's cool, but you cannot actually go and revoke them or regenerate them. That's the one limitation. The other limitation is essentially when using those OAuth creds that we issued you, when you actually use that to go and fetch your list of accounts, currently it will only return the accounts that's linked to your default Investec online banking profile. And that's obviously quite limited. So the stuff that we're currently busy working on is to mature that implementation and create an area within Investec Online dedicated to OAuth credential management. That will essentially allow you guys to, first of all, generate multiple OAuth credentials. So you might actually want to have various credentials for various apps or integrations that you are building. And also from a consenting perspective, when requesting a new credential, you can actually select any of your Investec Online profiles and then any accounts within those profiles. And that will essentially allow you to structure that a bit more, a lot better. And that's also, again, part of like other integrations that we're busy with. So we want to like streamline that all together and create a proper place for that. I think the rest of the stuff is, apart from the unique ID for transactions, as Wayne has mentioned, that is very much in play. However, we are very much dependent on other teams to provide us that, but we are constantly pushing in order to get that done. I guess the consensus was, or the main principle was always not to generate a fictitious transaction ID until such time where the actual downstream system would provide us a proper transaction ID, because that might actually render some of your implementations redundant or cause it to break. I think from a single code, I'm jumping around, obviously not going in sequence here. But in terms of single code base, multiple cards, so that is very much, again, a feature that so again, the one card, you can imagine the one card implementation. You can imagine having to apply the same code base to multiple cards might become a bit of a maintenance nightmare. So what that basically entails is just having the ability to say, okay, cool, I've got this one piece of code base and just broadcast it to any or selected cards. Improved logging. So again, that was something that came to light out of our one card implementation, was the fact that the context that's actually been persistent in the logs are actually quite limited. So we are looking into just expanding on that. And then the obvious elephant in the room here is basically the API documentation. Again, as I've mentioned, the documentation that you currently have is very much the stuff that was published an hour before going live with the API. So it's basically just getting to a point where it's matured and published in our proper developer portal. And then I think it just talks to documentation in general. So we are very much aware that our documentation is quite limited. There's a lot of work to be done there, and that is definitely something that we're going to be sorting out for you guys. The further after transaction features, I think that's the stuff that Ernie probably demoed tonight. Chip in if I missed something there.
So it's a part 2 for that. We're looking at a way. So one of the issues we've picked up is on the one cart implementation is occasionally they'd swipe a card, the point of sale times out, and it actually triggers a reversal of that transaction. But you're not seeing that in the programmable cards logs. So we are looking at how do we actually get that reversal so that you can check for that reversal in your code. And then we're actually having a look at some of the other conditions of what happens on the card system versus your code that's executing. So we're having a look at a couple of those kind of things and seeing how we can incorporate those into the after transaction so that you can cater for it in your code.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and then basically, so there's obviously a need for developers to, like yourselves, to have the ability to build an app and actually have somebody not using programmable banking to use that app. And again, so the primary restriction there again is, so in the UK open banking context, like you've got the PSD2 regulator that makes sure, or that ensures that the apps consuming you are actually valid and solid. The problem we've got in SA is if we had to allow any app on our platform, that would like very much be regulated by us. So we're trying to get our heads around practically how we can make that happen in a safe and secure manner. So that is why prefix with investigate. So that is definitely something that we want to give. We're just not 100% sure how we're going to regulate that. And then obviously the big ask there is always a payments API. So some of the stuff that we've been discussing recently is from a technical perspective, we believe that if you had to expose an endpoint that would allow you to transfer or make a payment to an already pre-configured beneficiary, or initiating an inter-account transfer, let's say for instance, every time you make a payment or you buy something, you round the amount up and you basically transfer the difference into, say for instance, your Prime Saver account. We believe that the risk is quite mitigated, but yeah, there's a lot of loops and stuff to jump through still in that regard, especially with our legal community, our info and cybersec community. But those are the two things that we're gonna start essentially prototyping, investigating, so that we can actually take it to our legal community and hopefully, if all goes well, get some buy-in on that, because we believe that shouldn't be too much of a risk. And yeah, I think I've covered everything in the list. Is there another slide, or is that it? Wayne, is there another slide, or is this it?
No, that's fine. Sorry, I'm like freezing here. My internet connection is unstable, it says.
Oh, yes.
Okay, I'm going to try and talk, but if I blank out, Willem, just jump in and pretend this is normal. Okay.
Okay.
So one of the questions we've been pondering with ourselves, we've seen the community build out. Basically what you're doing is doing calls outside of that editor to a outside world, and then using any language you want to go and consume the before after transaction and do stuff. Now the question is like, is that editor actually even useful, or would it be more useful to just basically expose those events as webhooks and then let you do whatever you want with them? Like it would save us time trying to build your Visual Studio, which we obviously never going to build. So like that's just an open question. Like, is it valuable to have the editor inside Investec Online, or should we focus on just getting like not only those webhooks, we're looking at potentially looking for, like the EFT webhooks also exposed.
Yeah,
you'll get unanimous list will be webhooks. No one uses the editor, I don't think.
Yep.
Yeah, I think also something important to note there is the idea or the plan is definitely not to replace the editor with webhooks. I guess you'll always have the editor. It's just, again, the 90% of the use cases are actually like keeping the code in that editor very, very lean. Essentially, that thing, that on before transaction thing, just makes a call out to an external system that you maintain and manage. And I guess, yeah, and that's something also that came to light during one of our planning sessions recently is, as Wayne has mentioned, do we actually go and evolve something that you might actually not even use, or do we just like give you another piece of functionality where you can shall I say, register various webhooks that basically triggers on those two events? And yeah, okay, we've got our answer.
I see Ben did a poll there for us. I'm sure the answer will be obvious, but that's fine.
Guys, see I think it's easy to say webhooks as well because we have editor. So, like,
it might be as simple as just your default code is a call out into the webhook, and then we just go from there, and then we don't have to build anything more inside there.
Yeah.
Okay. And then like my question to community, is there any features that you think would be valuable that you haven't seen in this presentation? We can check through that.
Yeah, Wayne, I have a question. Might not be a feature request because it seems like you guys are building on it already, right? So early in the week, a friend of mine called me, right? He saw some of the blog posts that OfficeZen was putting online, and he looked at some of the Python APIs. He's not part of the community, and he said, well, he basically runs an accounting platform for lawyers. It's just specifically targeted for lawyers. And currently the lawyers have to download their CSVs or their OFX files and import it into his platform. You know, so it's typically what an accounting system would do, right? So he wanted to know, he worked it out. He said he went to his clients, and about 13 to 15% of his clients are actually Investec clients. So he was wondering if he could use the API, the open API, to actually then, instead of his clients having to obviously do this manually, that he can then just hook into it. I told him, well, it's not as easy as that because you have to share the OAuth details with him. You know, they'd have to enroll and do all of that kind of stuff. So having the features that you're currently building, like the OAuth identity management or the third-party apps, where do you think something like that would fit in a proper legal manner?
It's quite interesting. We had one of the community members build an integration into Sage already.
Well, that is me. No, it was me. That was me.
Oh, it was you. Yes,
it was me, Wayne. But that's because I'm part of the community and I have access to it, right? So, but he doesn't, right? He's writing something totally different, not part of the community, and his clients is not going to give them their secret keys and client IDs. Okay. So obviously we need to figure out what's the best way for somebody like him to utilize the open API. That's
exactly the point we had earlier. Sorry for my blonde moment there. Okay, and I'm getting old. So the thing is exactly what Willem was explaining there, that third-party apps thing. Like, how do we get people to go through that three-legged OAuth steps that's not in the community? Because that's really what you want. Like, he publishes his accounting software. His clients go into the accounting software. They say, I want to link my Investec account. We redirect them to the Investec login. They put username, password, they create, like, yes, I'll share my data, and then we redirect back to him with a key, and then from then on, he's basically integrated into the API with his, like, bearer. He can, like, replace it for a bearer token and do all of that stuff. The issue we have there, and this is quite, I don't know if Willem spoke about it, but it's quite a hectic issue. It's how do we know that when we publish, that people publishing third-party apps that will use our three-legged OAuth are actually not dodge? Like, because it could actually just be a nasty phishing attack if you think about it. Like, you publish your app and say, talk to Investec, we redirect you to Investec's login page, but actually it's not Investec's login page, it's like some phishing site you built.
Yeah.
And then you like put in your credentials there, and suddenly Investec is like being held accountable for your app asking credentials to a third party. So, like, we're trying to figure out that one. As Willem mentioned.
What if we didn't go with the third-party option right now? Let's say you guys did the OAuth identity management. Could his client go into Investec Online and go in, create OAuth credentials that has read-only access to an account, and then give those credentials to him to use the Open API? Would that be legal and safe?
I'm not sure it's legal and safe, because he's going to have to copy and paste it and like email it to his buddy. That's not safe at all. But
would it not be possible for you guys to do some level of vetting and produce a list of trusted or relatively trusted third parties. So,
That's
you know, the
exactly.
moment somebody's trying to log in to get these credentials, they'll get a warning that says, please make sure that whoever, you know, this is your responsibility now if you haven't checked the list and they're not on the list.
100%, Adam. Like, that's the work we need to do. It's like, obviously that terrifies the banking people horribly, especially when you start talking about maybe opening it for payments one day. Like, that just like makes them freak out. So it's definitely something we want to do. We just need to do the work and get our compliance, legal, blah, blah, all of those people to like look at, are they going to be happy with that? We will definitely have to have a vetted list from Investec that says we only trust these 5 apps because we went to the creators of those 5 apps and we did some form of due diligence, like what's your security like and all of those things. To be like a third party thing.
I don't know if you can hear me because my
we
Zoom app is, I can hear you guys. I can't see you because I've got a white frozen screen here, but I'm leaving it alone. Cool, man. So basically, the way to get around that essentially is to actually onboard that third-party application onto our Open API platform. And through that process, we'll then obviously issue them a client ID and secret, which they then have to present. And then in order to get user context in that request, like essentially, or the thinking at this stage is for the user to go on within Investec Online, generating an API key for that integration. So essentially, that third party will then identify themselves from a system point of view using their client ID and secret, and then obviously provide user context in the form of an API key that the actual user has generated from within Investec Online, that he or she then can maintain and revoke or whatever. But I guess at the same time, like letting those third parties into our world will very much, you know, be on us from a regulatory point of view. So in other words, we'll have to go through the due diligence in terms of how they're going to persist those API keys, you know, whether it's in a secure manner and the rest. So there's a lot of work and persuasion to be done in that regard.
Yeah, I think the safest route might be to get people who want to integrate with the API to register and actually get vetted. And then once you have that registered list, only those people will be allowed. And then what you can do is, as Investec, assign those people an API key. So they must still get credentials from the client, but they use their API key, so you know which provider that is that's actually accessing the open API.
Yeah, 100%. And again, you know, that basically allows us to track, because obviously that context will be included within our tracing logs and the rest. So if there's an event, like there's sufficient data for us to actually track back and you know, follow that incident, shall I say, that fraud incident. If like, I think currently the open API being read-only, and the fact that we don't actually expose any personal identifiable information, that helps us quite a bit. But this thing is going to evolve, and those type of interactions is going to become an admin nightmare.
Does that then fall outside of the current feature set that you're building? Because it's, or does it fall within like the third party area?
So the stuff that we are currently doing, shall I say it's pretty much within the OAuth identity management as part of that work that we're doing. It basically all fits together at the end of the day. So essentially we're designing it in such a way that the exact same place where you are managing your own keys for your own integrations is probably going to be the place where our clients will actually go to generate an API key for a third party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Adam, just to answer yours, like to make once-off payments to unregistered beneficiaries, that's where the risk is for the bank, like the biggest one. In the UK, what they do is they do a transactional second factor when you call the API and do the payment out. So we might have to like think of something like that. Like say when somebody calls the API, we actually send like an in-app to your phone, you hit accept and then we pay it. Otherwise, it like So that one is really complicated. The beneficiary and transfer one, we're hoping we can sort of get over the line, because at least you went into the website, you added it manually. There were some checks and balances leading to that point.
It might sound like a stuck record, but I'm quite a fan of if this, then that. So I was just thinking, yeah, I mean, you guys have heard me say this before, but I was thinking if we can expose that, like when I do something, then send money somewhere. Or you could like just say like action, I click a button and it like posts my transactions somewhere. Then the third parties could register with if this, then that, and they could worry about the curation of third parties in the connection. And then we would have control over which connections are published. So the third party would have to contact us to have their connection published on the marketplace.
Yeah. So the thing is our approach is to, it's what's that analogy with the boiling the when you boil a frog, what you throw it in cold water and then you heat the water up slightly. You don't throw it all straight into boiling water. So what we want to do is, I think there's a lot of ways to get around this. I think initially we could potentially allow you to facilitate an inter-account transaction for a maximum amount, and the same for beneficiaries. And then as we understand that, and as our legal community understands that and become used to that, then we can actually see, okay, cool, what's the next progression from there to make it a bit more useful. But at the end of the day, like it's all just like getting that foundation in place and getting people used to it, and then leveling it up like systematically.
So just out of interest, I don't know if it's going to be useful for anybody, like the South African Financial Services Conduct Authority, they've got like a fintech arm almost to them. And they're busy doing a document around open banking in South Africa. So they're talking to banks around the requirements and what it would mean. So it looks like something like PSD2 is coming. I'm just not sure like if it's this century or not. Or
Yeah.
Okay, guys.
But I mean, that would make our lives a lot easier, because essentially then we just, then at least there's like a regulatory technical standard that we can just implement, and everybody will be happy. At this stage, we basically, flying solo.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. I don't want to keep you all night. Really appreciate the update. Lishen, awesome demo. Thank you so much.
Yeah, epic.
And yeah, it's sometimes hard to just stop and celebrate this because we are so consistent at just running this meetup every week and people joining, and you guys like consistently working on these things. And sometimes I think people get excited about what's possible, but it's actually amazing that we're here at all and that we're still here. So thanks so much for just putting in so much effort. And it's amazing to see how much effort you guys put in compared to like other bank people I've worked with. I won't mention names, not at Investec, but other banks. So yeah, thanks guys for making it possible. And it's just, and for community members who join, especially the guys who come often, it is a long slog. So thank you so much. And yeah, have a good evening. We'll see you next week, hopefully.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.